Hello everyone. My name is Capella Hunnevald. I am a student in Deborah Maltby's English 2320-002 British Literature after 1790 class at the University of Missouri St. Louis. And this is my spring 2016 semester finals review project. I ask that you please pardon my voice, as my immune system has chosen this of all days to stab me in the back and allow something to get into my throat, so I'll do my best to be legible. But why is it called modernism if it happened in the past? This was a question that I asked in my younger days when I was first exposed to British literature, and my older brother, after laughing at me, made me feel like an idiot when he explained it to me. But it was confusing at the time to a 10-year-old, cut me some slack. Making sense of the centuries-long evolution of British literature. If I were to ask you, how would you define British literature, what would spring to your mind? Shakespeare? The Tale of King Arthur? The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge? Jim Henson Studio's version of A Christmas Carol, perhaps? You could give any of these answers, or hundreds more, and be absolutely right. Well, okay, maybe not the Muppet Christmas Carol bit. I'm pretty sure Gonzo's an alien. He's not British. But still, when one says British literature, one casts a very large net. Great Britain has a very long and well-documented history, full of very quirky people, and I mean seriously quirky. Take these clowns, for example. Ezra Pound was an insane fascist, and don't even get me started on the things that James Joyce got up to when he wasn't busy writing. Anyway, many of these quirky people felt the urge to immortalize their quirkiness through the ancient art of combining ink, paper, and any readily available sharp object. Scholars can spend an entire academic lifetime studying just one period of British literary history and still not learn all there is to learn. As most of us do not have an entire lifetime to devote to this, let's instead simply focus on one emblematic work from each of the three major periods: the Romantic, Victorian, and Modern eras. We'll begin with Romanticism because who doesn't love a good romance? The Romantic era is said to have begun in the early 1790s. One of the major catalysts of creative inspiration for the era's leading minds was the French Revolution, which badly rattled the established powers in Britain. What the Revolution had demonstrated to the world was that A. Ideas about freedom and individuality can spread like wildfire among oppressed people. B. When enough oppressed people take that idea to heart and rise up and band together, they can topple the mighty. And C. Those same oppressed people can turn into bloodthirsty monsters when they have the sources of their oppression at their mercy. The British Romantics viewed these happenings as both an inspiration and a warning. The Revolution showed just how powerful the empowered individual could be, but also graphically illustrated just how grave the consequences could be should the empowered individual lose sight of their humanity. Romantic poets placed great emphasis on the importance of feeling and emotion instead of mere cold logic when interacting with the world. Celebration of the common man and his struggles is another core theme found in many Romantic works. The Romantic poets also loved to reflect on childhood and the innocence of youth. Innocence doomed, they felt, to inevitably be destroyed by the cruel, cruel world once a person reaches adulthood. And most Romantics believed that nature was far mightier than man and deserved our respect and worship, and that nature would invariably outlast us. Romantics tended to live in the moment rather than worrying about the future. Consider the poetry of Charlotte Smith, and more specifically, her work Beachy Head. From the very first line, an early worshipper at nature's shrine, we see reverence of nature. Also note the capitalization, as though nature itself were God. We see very strong sensory imagery throughout. This was also typical for the Romantics, who believed that poetry should evoke strong feelings in the reader. And Smith accomplishes this wonderfully. Her descriptions of the waves and breakers and the very soil beneath her feet make you feel as though you're standing on the cliff right beside her. By the end of the poem, she waxes on about how impermanent mankind's works were compared to the eternal power of nature. Lines 403 to 406. No traces in the records of mankind, save what these half-obliterated mounds and half-filled trenches doubtfully impart to some lone antiquary. These are not the words of a person with a great deal of faith in technology, and indeed most Romantics did place much more faith in the natural world than the steam engine. But that would change drastically with the onset of the Victorian era. Named after Queen Victoria, naturally. The Victorian era is said to have begun in 1838 with her ascendancy to the throne, and lasted until the outbreak of World War I in 1914. The era was characterized by both great optimism for the social movements and technological wonders which were carrying mankind into the future, and also a pervasive sense of doubt about that future. It was a time of changes, and most people of the time reacted to that change by either embracing it or else by digging their heels in and refusing to budge from the way things are. Sounds kind of like America in the 21st century, does it not? There can be little doubt as to where Victorian poet Christina Rossetti landed on that spectrum. A devout Anglo-Catholic, her 1862 poem Goblin Market drips with so much self-righteous scare them straight symbolism that it could have been written by an American public school sexual education instructor. A young maiden partakes of the fruits of the goblin men, and afterward the longing for the fruit burns so great in her that she nearly dies of it. But it's okay, because her sister's purity and love save her, and she goes on to marry a man and have a bunch of babies and be a good little housewife forever. Yay, happy ending. Rossetti, like so many other Victorian writers, was afraid of change to the established order. But that change rolled in like a bulldozer in 1914, when the eruption of World War I heralded the start of the modernist era. As British citizens died by the millions in the trenches, the people back home tried to stay optimistic, but this was quickly snuffed out and replaced by cold, hard realism which permeated into the poetry and literature of the time. If Romanticism was living in the moment with little worry about the future, and Victorianism was trepidation about the uncertainty of that future, then Modernism was undoubtedly that horrifying future brought blazingly to life. Tanks, machine guns, mustard gas, silent bomb-dropping zeppelins, and many other technological abominations put the romantic notion of nature's supremacy over mankind to the test, and fulfilled the Victorians' worst fears about rampant machinery destroying civilization. Consider the works of Wilfred Owen, who was killed in action at the appallingly young age of 25. Drawing upon his own wartime experiences dodging bullets and charging through clouds of poison gas, there is nothing of the glory of war in his writings. Written mostly from a military hospital while recovering from what we now call PTSD, Owen's poetry is so gritty and realistic you can almost smell the gunpowder in the air. We see a great example of this in his poem Dulce et decorum est, or How Sweet and Fitting It Is. This short, 28-line poem contains more sensory imagery than many full-length novels, as the speaker recalls seeing a fellow soldier drown in his own bloody lungs in a mustard gas attack. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning, he writes. This poem exemplifies the modernist theme that war is not glorious, war is not noble, war is not splendid, that war is, in fact, hell, and we should not be encouraging it. The final lines of Owen's poem say it best. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. how sweet and fitting it is to die for one's fatherland. Great Britain has a long and well-documented history, full of amazing stories and outrageous people. We have only reviewed 3 small parts of that history, the Romantic, Victorian, and modern eras, but it is these eras that are widely considered to be some of the most important in British literary history, and indeed European literary history as a whole. Every student in the country would do very well to take at least one course such as this one. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it.